Wow, everybody, welcome back to Wildlife 101. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm mainly excited because we haven't done one of these in several months. Well, as you get on to our Wildlife 101 webinar, I'd love it if you put in the chat where you're calling in from, where you're listening in from. Are you in Milton? Are you somewhere in Georgia? We've had folks from North Carolina, Florida, all over the Southeast. And as you're here to learn about the Eastern box turtle today and maybe some general turtle knowledge, most of you probably have these in your neighborhood, and you've maybe seen them, maybe not. We're going to learn a little bit more about that today. So as you get on, go ahead and put in the chat. Oh, it says our chat's disabled. Uh-oh. Thanks, Brian. You're a regular.
I
Thanks.
just I just hit the button. I just clicked it.
All right, let's try it out now. There we go. All the way from Norcross. Thanks, Thomas. Awesome. Okay, well, today, as people are rolling into our webinar, uh, we're going to kind of go over the ground rules. We're going to talk about what we're going to learn today, and then I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful presenters that are going to share a lot with us. Tuning in from Canton, close to Milton, that's true. That's right. Decatur, Mason Mill Park, Sally, thanks for being here. Yeah, we're really excited. Oh, Matali is on here, and I have to give her a shout out because she's my intern for this semester. She's at Cambridge High School, and she decided to take on the challenge of following me around the woods. So I'm glad Matali's on here to learn a little bit about what we find in those woods. So yeah, okay, great. So we're gonna jump right in. Like I said, welcome to Wildlife 101. And today we are so excited to see if the turtle actually crosses the road. And I'm here to find out from you guys a little bit more about turtles crossing the road. But before we dive into our presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do here in Milton. My name is Ranger Jen, or affectionately Ranger Jen. Um, People in the rest of my life would call me Jen Young. That's my real name. But I teach youth environmental education programs. I lead wildlife walks that you're welcome to join. These are all family friendly. And what we're out here to do is teach you about what's in your backyard. Parks are merely just an extension of your property. And it's an opportunity for you to come out, ask questions, and learn about a new species that you have maybe never seen, or maybe you've seen and you don't know enough about it. One of my signature classes is my fishing class. We do teach a little bit about pond ecology, and we teach about the different species of fish that you might find in our local ponds. And then we actually get to fish, which is, usually the fun part. And don't worry if you don't catch anything. It's still early in the season, but we know when the dogwoods are blooming, that's when people want to be out trying to catch bass. If you've joined us for one of these webinars, then you already know the drill. But if you're new, this webinar is being recorded. The chat and the transcript are recorded. And so we keep that on our website, miltonga.gov, I believe. But we'll put it in the chat and we keep it on the website so that you can view it later or you can share it with your friends and family. Sometimes you'll go back because you actually need this resource and you don't even realize it. And I've had people email me and say, "Hey, Jen, what's that website again? I want to go back and look at this video because we actually had a black bear show up in our property. And I wanted to go back and learn a little bit more about what I can do to protect my property." We're also going to give you an opportunity to share your questions that you might have for our panelists tonight. And you can also use the Q&A box at any time. But we prefer that you use the chat box. It gives us an opportunity to respond in real time. If you use the Q&A box, we can answer your question, but it's not as interactive. And we love for people to be interactive. So if you do not see your question get answered in a time that you think it should be answered, that's probably because we're saving it to answer verbally at the end, right? There will be time at the end where you can ask questions if things pop up during the presentation that you want to know more about. And then at the end, you're going to get a survey after you close out of the application. And it's 3 questions, and it's really an opportunity for you to share your feedback about what you want to learn more about this topic or future topics. A lot of these presentations have come about like someone requested that they wanted to learn more about turtles. And so here we are today learning about turtles. I know that beavers are a topic that people have asked about, different species of birds, predator birds or birds of prey, and we hope to have that conversation coming up. And you should check out our owl presentation with Linda May. That one was a lot of fun. And now I want to have a barred owl in my backyard. If you have any questions, my email is here at the bottom. You can share fun wildlife footage. I often get people's Ring camera footage where they say, look what showed up on my property. And I'm never going to turn that down because I think it's fun to see what shows up in your backyard because I live in the city of Tucker and my backyard is probably very different than yours. Now, getting into the meat and potatoes of what we're doing today, we have 2 professors of biology from the University of North Georgia, and they were so kind to accept my invitation to come on here. And I hope I presented it in a way that made them feel very welcome because 2 people in the city of Milton um, have actually read what you've been doing up in North Georgia and said, Jen, you should reach out to them. I think they're the people that you want to have on your presentation. And so Dr. Mook and Dr. Hislop were so gracious to be on here today to teach us about the eastern box turtle, about their habitat, their biology, to help us better understand what we can do to be good stewards of the land that we share with them, and also how do we take better care of them, right? And so if you encounter one, I'm hoping that what you guys get out of this experience today is that not only could you identify an eastern box turtle when you're out in the woods, and I can tell you 2 secret spots where they're always walking through, but also you understand how important it is to protect the species. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our awesome presenters and give them an opportunity to share about their research and teach you all today.
All right. Get it started. Is it showing up for everybody?
We're good to go.
All right. Awesome. Can you see my little arrow floating around?
Yeah, Dr. Mook, if you want to, at the top, your display settings, if you want to switch it to presenter mode, we're looking at your presentation. There you go. There we are. You're good to
Awesome.
go.
Okay, there we go. Little glitches. Yes, Jen, thank you so much for inviting us to let us talk about our wonderful critters that we've been studying. When you invited me, of course, I started thinking of titles and, thinking back to when we started this study. It's been 13 years that we've been doing this study. A lot of it was just, why do I want to do this? I want to know what the turtles are doing. So why did the box turtle cross the road and other things that we've been learning? Again, I'm Dr. Mook, and then Dr. Hislop is joining me today. And we actually have a third partner in crime, which is Dr. Lisa Myers. And she is off doing whatever she's doing. She's done some other events. But yeah, let me go to the next slide. So we actually have a website. You can find us all on there, the UNG Herp Lab. We like all things herp, whether it's turtles or snakes or lizards or whatever. So were on there, but you can see Dr. Myers there. She's actually has some background with sea turtles. Um, so, um, Besides us, though, it takes quite the team to do some of this research. So, like I said, Dr. Hislop and I started this about 13 years ago, and Dr. Myers joined us about 3 years ago, I think. But along the way, we've had other faculty members that have assisted us. Dr. Morgan has helped us with some of the uh, microbiology and genetics kind of stuff. Dr. Nair was our physiologist. She actually did some work with ornate box turtles as well. And then probably one of our more important collaborations is with Zoo Atlanta with Dr. Sam Rivera and Dr. Megan Watson, who have been here several times to do a variety of things with us. And you'll see some of their work as they go through these slides. And then some of you hopefully are noticing that big number at the bottom. Since we started this 13 years ago, we've had over 100 students helping us with this project. So like I said, it has taken quite the team. We've collected a lot of data along the way. I want to start with a little bit of generalities. I had a lot of generalities, and then Jen's like, more science. So I have brought in more science. But of course, one of the basic questions is, is it a turtle or is it a tortoise because it's on land? And I started seeing these little diagrams showing up on Facebook last fall, must have been listening to me. But yeah, there are some differences between different types of turtles, and I thought this little graphic did a good job of demonstrating that. Are you all the same? No, they're not all the same. Tortoises, of course, are on land. If you think of a Galapagos tortoise, that's what we're talking about, the big domed shell and the elephant-like feet, and they really don't go in the water. And then there's freshwater turtles who have a little bit more flattened shell. They look a little bit more streamlined. They have webbing between their feet, but they actually do, a good number of them do still come out on land, but they do spend a good bit of time in the water as well. And then sea turtles, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And of course, they're 100% aquatic unless the females are coming up to nest, and they have flippers, of course. So they're really not meant to be walking on land at all. And then a fourth group that this little diagram put in here are soft-shelled turtles, which are actually aquatic turtles as well, but they're a little bit different in that the covering of their shell actually is more like skin, and they can actually breathe through that surface area. So they're kind of unique. So at the end of the day, yeah, different species, they kind of live in different places, and they're all turtles. And so, as they say, all tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises, right? And then there's one other name that didn't make it onto this handout that many of you have probably heard of before, and that's terrapins. And that word is actually from an Algonquin word for turtle. And usually it's referring to the diamondback terrapins that you see at the bottom of my screen down here. Is this little box showing? I don't know if it's all right. Anyway, so that word became somewhat common in Great Britain. They, new species of turtles when they discovered the Americas. And so a lot of people will call a lot of turtles terrapins as well. That's where that word comes from. The diamondback terrapin that you see down here at the bottom is fairly unique. There are a few species of turtles that can handle brackish water, but this is the only one that pretty much lives exclusively in brackish water, which is a mixture of fresh water and salt water kind of in between. So he's a little bit unique. All right, so that's our little introduction to turtles. But then we can look at what does Georgia have? And we have quite a diversity of turtles here in Georgia. So starting in the top left, of course, most people are familiar with the snapping turtles. They have a lot more ridges on their shell, make them look very dinosaur, very archaic looking. And of course, they are highly aquatic. Here are the soft-shelled turtles, some different species. You can see their shell kind of looks very leathery compared to some of the others that we have. We do have one true tortoise in Georgia, which is the gopher tortoise. It's found more in the lower part of the state where there's more sandy soils because they do burrow into the soils, and the red clay is a bit harder to burrow into. But that is the only true tortoise that we have here. Bottom left are mud and musk turtles, again, highly aquatic turtles. I'll go to the bottom right next are all of the sea turtles, which obviously are in the ocean along the coast at certain times of the year in Georgia. And then this big group up here in the top right are what we call the emydid turtles, which are also aquatic turtles, which include the painted turtle, all of our different sliders, including the red-eared sliders that are common as pets, and also the one we're focusing on today, which are box turtles, which might seem a little odd. Why are these very terrestrial species in with this mixture of aquatic turtles? And that's because these guys were actually aquatic turtles that have just kind of decided to come back onto land and started reacquiring tortoise-like features with that more domed shell that we associate with tortoises, more elephant-like feet. But if you look closely, especially their hind feet, if you have a chance to see one up close, they do still have some webbing between their toes, which many of the aquatic turtles also have, which is better for swimming. So that's why they're in this group. They're actually aquatic turtles that have come back onto land, but that makes them kind of unique because they do still utilize both aquatic habitats as well as terrestrial habitats. And so they can be really good indicators of health in both of those environments. All right, so of course, everyone recognizes a turtle, right? Even my kids have learned to know what a turtle was at a very young age because of their shell. Now, the formal name for the shell pieces, the top of the shell is called the carapace, and the bottom of the shell is called the plastron. And so with this is one of the oldest surviving body forms in vertebrates. Clearly, that shows that this is a very successful strategy for survival. It offers a lot of protection to these guys, and so it has persisted for a long time. And that's why a lot of people call turtles nature's tanks, because they are so durable and so protective. One of the other interesting features that you can quickly see with a turtle is that they don't have teeth. They actually have a beak, which seems kind of strange. Why don't they have teeth, given what they eat? Well, to work in a little bit more science just for Jen, that's kind of makes sense when you start looking at where turtles are placed on the tree of life. And more recently, they're placed in this group. So they're reptiles, of course. Hopefully, most people know that. Amniotes refers to the fact that they lay eggs. And then they're in this little subgroup called diapsids. If you understand prefixes, di refers to two. And so what that is referring to is the fact that they have these two extra openings in their shell, or in their skull. And so down here at this bottom figure, you can see here's the eye orbit. And then behind the eye orbit are these two openings. And it'd basically be where the ears are on the shell. That's called the temporal bone. And so they have two openings there. But turtles weren't always placed in this group. They were actually considered anapsid, which is more like this one here in A. There's actually no openings at the back of their skull. And so for a long time, turtles were shifted a little bit down the tree of life, considered to be much more primitive. But with new genetic analyses and things like that, and this is referring to that article, they actually place turtles in between the lepidosaurs, which are our lizards, and the archosaurs, which are our dinosaurs, our crocodilians, and our birds. And so it kind of makes sense that turtles might actually have a beak because they are more closely related to birds than some of the earlier reptilian groups. So I thought y'all might find that kind of interesting. All right, but back to the shell. When you look at most turtles, the covering of the shell is covered by this material. It's keratin, just like your fingernails and your hair. And it's these structures here, this is some of them peeled off. And so this is keratin, and they're called scutes. And so when you look at the top of the shell, the top of the shell is subdivided into these little sections with most of the turtles, and these are individual scutes. This line in between represents the growth plate where those scutes continue to grow. And they grow much like a tree does. And so you get these rings. And you can count them to some extent to get an idea of the age of the turtles, but it only works for so long. Basically, each growth ring represents a growth spurt. And kind of like children, if you have children at home, they can have more than one growth spurt through the year. But there are some more evident breaks because they usually are brumating part of the year. And so if you look at this one, there's kind of a thicker line here, a thicker line here, and here. And so you can kind of count those for years. But eventually their growth slows down and these rings start to get really small and hard to read. But that's what the scutes are. And like I said, you can use it in some species as an estimate of age early on, but after that, it's hard to kind of tell. All right, so the shell itself underlies those scutes. And you can see here, one of the questions that we often get, especially from children, are can turtles leave their shells? Well, when you actually look at the shell itself is made up of the bones, in particular, predominantly the rib bones and then the vertebrae. They all flatten and fuse together. And so the shell is the bones that make up their body. So at the end of the day, no, turtles cannot leave their shells because that is bone, which creates some interesting situations. We'll get to that in a second. One thing that many turtles can do is actually retract their heads into their shell. And so this depicts it here on the left. It shows the neck extended out. But here on the right, you can see the head is pulled back in and it forms this kind of characteristic S shape, much like what you see in many aquatic birds. But this is what allows them to draw their head back into their shell and protect that from predators that might be trying to bite them. So the problem that this produces is with respect to breathing. They have no rib cage that you can expand. So if we want to take a deep breath in, you take that deep breath, and what you're using is the diaphragm, which is a muscle in the middle of your chest. And then also by expanding out your rib cage, you create what's called negative pressure. And so with that negative pressure, as these muscles pull outwards, for the turtle, what they have to do is actually move the legs out in order to create this negative pressure. They move their legs out, that pulls down on the gut, which then pulls down on the lung, which resides up here at the top of the shell. That's how they have to be able to breathe. They don't have a rib cage to expand, so they have to physically move their legs out of the way to move the gut, which is the intestines and stuff, and then pull down on the lung. That's what pulls air in. And so one question I get is, why do they hiss? Well, that's because the opposite scenario, when you surprise them, they have to pull their legs in. That pushes in on all the intestines, all the guts, which then pushes up on the lung and it forces that air out. And when you surprise them, they do that very quickly, and that forces air out of their lung very quickly, which causes that hissing motion. But that would be their normal breathing as well. They would pull their legs in, move some of those, contract some of those muscles to push in on the gut in order to be able to expire all of that air. So they have a really interesting physiology that you see in no other organism on the planet. Another question, why are they called box turtles? And I'm sure many of you probably already knew the answer to this question. And that's because they actually have a hinge in their plastron. And so here in the top right, this is showing you why they're called box turtles, because this hinge, which is depicted by the white arrow here, allows them to actually fold up that plastron and seal themselves into their shell as a total box. And there are other box turtles throughout the world. This is not unique only to our box turtles, but it is a very special feature that not many turtles have. There are other turtles and tortoises that have hinges, so I put a couple of them in here just for comparison. There's actually a tortoise called a hingeback tortoise, and they have a hinge here. It's kind of back near their butt, and so they can actually drop down the bottom of their carapace, so the top part of the shell, in order to protect their hind end. So that one's very unique for sure. And then another species of turtle that we have around here that have hinges include the mud turtles, and they actually have two hinges. One here, which is in a similar location to the box turtles along the front, like between the two front legs, but then they have another one farther back, closer to the rear legs. Now, they cannot close themselves up into a box. They have what's called a reduced plastron, which means the plastron's a little bit smaller. And because it's smaller, it can't actually enclose where the legs are. They can still pull their head in and they can kind of pull their legs in, but there's not enough shell to cover it up when they pull them in. And so there's a lot of debates as to why they have two hinges. And one is because it allows them to have more flexibility in that structure. These guys have actually been found climbing trees above a pond, and they'll rest on the branches up above the water and can fall in. And so maybe that's one reason why once they evolved this feature, they maintained it, because it does allow them for more of that flexibility. All right, but that's why we have box turtles. They have a hinge in their plastron that allows them to close up. All right, so the specific turtle that we've been studying is one of a subgroup of subspecies of northern box turtles. And we specifically study the eastern box turtles. And this range map, the color shows where all the different subspecies are found. And we're focusing on the one here in orange, again, the eastern box turtle. The green would be what's called the three-toed box turtle. We have the Gulf Coast box turtle in purple, and then a subspecies of a box turtle called the Florida box turtle, obviously in Florida. And so there are some subtle differences between all of them, and that's why they're considered subspecies. But along the separation zones here, they can actually still interbreed with each other. So that's why they're not full species. They're considered subspecies. But you can see here with the eastern box turtle, their range goes all the way from northern Florida all the way up into New England. They even used to be in Canada, but not in very high numbers. And then this weird pattern of covering about half of the state of Michigan to out to the Midwest. So they have a very expansive range. And as you can imagine, they use a lot of different habitats across this wide range. And so we were curious about how they're using their home range. This is more Dr. Hislop's area. She's the ecologist, but how they're using the habitats in these home ranges, how they're moving throughout those habitats, specifically in what's called the Piedmont region of Georgia, which is kind of the northern part of Georgia up near the mountains. There really wasn't much published in this area on how they're utilizing the habitats here, which, as you can imagine, is very different from a habitat in Michigan or in Connecticut. And so when you find an eastern box turtle, there are some differences between males and females. Now, this does not hold for all turtles, and maybe not even all box turtles. But for our eastern box turtles, it's a fairly good way to be able to tell whether you have a male or female. One is the head color. Typically, but not always, the males have a lot more coloration on their head and even onto their front limbs. And they also have these gorgeous red eyes, as you can see with this guy. Now, the color of red can actually change, apparently somewhat with diet, but also with genetics. And some females can actually have red eyes as well, but predominantly males have the red eyes and those brighter colors. The females often have a more domed shell. The males tend to be a little bit more elongate. That more dome shape allows them to actually store more eggs internally. So they think that's why that's been evolving that way. Um, but that's hard to tell if you don't have a male and female side by side. Um, if you can pick a turtle up with these box turtles, you might see differences in the shape of the plastron. And so in this example here in the bottom right, you can see it's almost looks like an egg shape. And so the males have a concave area that has evolved there. And that's for mating purposes so that when they're mounting the female, they fit better against the shell. And the females don't have that. Their plastron would be very flat. But if you can't pick a turtle up, again, that's something that's hard to see. Probably the best indicator of tail length of sex is going to be looking at the tail length. And so the males have a much longer tail here. Where the cloaca is, the cloaca will actually be passed to the back of the shell. So they have a much longer tail, and that's for storing their reproductive organs. The females, the tails will be much shorter and up closer to the shell. And that works fairly well for really all turtle species, but they don't always show you their tails very easily, so that can be hard to observe as well. But there are some differences between male and female. If you ever find one, you can at least try to tell if you have a male or female. All right, so why do we care about studying turtles? And this could be a talk all unto itself. Here's a few that I pulled out. Obviously, they are part of the food web. They eat other things. They're eaten by other things, and so they're a part of that whole equation. As they eat other things, they will obviously help with cycling minerals through our environment. They produce fertilizer that can benefit plants. They help process the soil as they dig into the soil, as they nest, as they overwinter, they're digging in the soil. When they eat plants, they're often eating the seeds and the berries, much like us, right? We like our apples and watermelon. They eat the seeds and then can actually poop them out somewhere else. And so they help disperse those seeds throughout their habitat. For some plants, this is actually a vital component to their survival because a lot of plants have seeds with very tough seed coats. And so, in order for the baby plant to kind of break out of that seed and germinate, the seed coat has to be weakened, and it's weakened by going through the digestive tract of another animal, such as a turtle. And so, they help not only spread the seeds, but allow the seeds to be able to germinate and grow wherever they end up. And then lastly, kind of an interesting one, Dr. Hislop had found this picture and referenced that butterflies often land on box turtles. And I'm sorry, the image isn't super clear. But they're often drinking the tears off of the eyes of the turtles. And it's thought that they provide salts for the butterflies. So, like I said, this could be a talk unto itself. These turtles provide what are called ecosystem services to us. Their health is intimately related to our own health at the end of the day. And so this is why we want to study them. We want to learn how they're helping with a lot of these processes. All right, so now it's time for our poll if Christy got it set up. I was just kind of curious, wanted you guys to have a chance to interact. Have you ever found a turtle crossing the road? Is a poll going to pop up? Did we ever get it going?
It did, and it's being answered.
Oh, okay. I don't see it. Hold on. Let me see. There we go. Okay, now I can see your presentation.
And if you would like to get rid of that little box, you can hit the hide.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I hit it, if I would do something bad. So thank you.
Nope, you're good. It looks like 20 out of 23 people who answered have said yes, and
Awesome.
3 out of the 24 have said no.
Well, that's amazing. I was kind of curious since we, might get a mixture of urban and rural folks, how many have ever found a turtle crossing the road? So most of our people here have actually found a turtle crossing the road. And so now, hopefully, when you find one crossing the road, you might be able to identify it as a box turtle if you hadn't really been looking for box turtles specifically. And so this is our turtle number 5 here in this picture. We did not find him crossing the road. We found him back in the woods. But I was just kind of curious. Like I said, wanted to give everybody a chance to interact with the presentation and get a little bit of information. But yeah, this, like I said, is one of the questions that I was kind of wondering, where are the turtles going and why? If they cross the road, where are they going? And we have actually had at least one cross the road. He decided to go to Walmart and not come back. So it does happen even in our research. All right, so this is the bulk of our research site. It is about 77 acres, now closer to about 72. We've actually lost about 5 acres to an apartment complex. Yay. But in this relatively smallish area, we actually have a good number of different habitats. We have a wetland that goes down through the middle of this habitat with a couple of streams that eventually conjoin. We get beavers in there that also dam it up. And then around all the edges of what you see here, we have various highland areas, which we call upland areas that are have a lot of oak trees. We also have some invasive privet, and I'll show you some of that in a second. We also have some different utility areas. We have like a gravel road. We have a mowed sewer line that's mowed fairly regularly throughout the whole year. And then a power line that's only mowed maybe once a year. And so it gives us a variety of different habitats for us to be able to see how are the turtles using these different habitats. At the end of the day, we are what we call an urban island. Around all the edges, which I've kind of gotten rid of, we have roads, houses, apartments, businesses, schools, Walmarts across the way. And so we're really a green island amidst this urban area. And this is where the turtles are living. So here's some images from our actual site. I'll kind of walk through them just so you have an idea of what we're looking at. And so this is bottomland, might accumulate some water, but you start seeing some of this invasive privet that's growing up in the background. You just see all this little plant material. And this is when it's dry. Down here in the bottom right, you have more of a seep here that, again, we have a lot more privet and it can be kind of dry or wet. In B, we have one of the mowed areas, so it's a lot more vegetative growth. We'll actually get a lot of blackberries that grow in these areas, which are important for the turtles. This is one of those upland areas. You can see a bunch of the oak leaves here on the ground. Of course, there is a turtle. And so a very open, very different appearance than any of these other areas. And then again, ferns, you know that this is a wetland kind of environment that stays wet year round. So we have all these different areas that these turtles can actually get to. And we want to go in and again, just see how much are they using these areas? When are they using these areas throughout the year? And so when we find a turtle, we put a transmitter on them. And so many of you have probably seen these. It can be anything like this, where we have this kind of button looking structure about the size of a quarter, but much thicker. We glue that onto the top of the shell. It's not permanent. I have to actually remove it every 2 years because the battery wears out. But these emit a radio signal. And you can see them on bears and wolves. They put them on as collars. And some of those are satellite based, elephants, they've used them. They can make them even smaller. They make small enough transmitters to put on insects, to follow insects around. But this is the size of ours. We have to kind of follow a percent weight kind of ratio. It's kind of like you carrying a backpack, right? Eventually it gets too heavy and very burdensome when we don't want to be a burden to the turtle. We just want to be able to find them so we can study them, right? So that's what we use to go out and find them. And so here's Dr. Hislop. This was back in her indigo snake days, but she's using one of the antennas with a radio, with a receiver to listen to the signals coming from the target animals so that we can go in and find them. And here's one of our turtles that we've gone in to find using this transmitter, whereas otherwise you probably never would have found that animal just walking through the woods. So we can go find them whenever we need to and then collect a variety of data on them. And so just in our first year, we have a ton of data. This was just from an earlier publication or an earlier research project that a student had worked on. In 1 year's worth of data, here's just an idea of what we're looking at. Each dot represents an individual instance that we tracked the different turtles at the time. Pink for female and blue for males, just for sake of conversation. And then in that first year, what kind of percentages of the habitats are they found in? And so this particular year, most of our observations were in those dry upland areas, but they were using really all of the different habitats. And so now we have 13 years worth of this data and other publications with it. But I thought this was a little simpler for you guys to see. So yeah, how are they using these different habitats? And we can go in and look at the plants and temperatures and all kinds of other stuff, right? So there's the turtles themselves. What kind of features do the turtles have? How big are they? How old are they if we can estimate their age? This is one that actually has a deformity. It actually has an extra scute here. Normally they have 5 what are called vertebral scutes. So these are right down the vertebrae. There's usually 5 of them. And so this has this weird little extra one squished in here. And so that's something that we want to take note of. How often is that happening in our turtles and why? So we can study things like that about the turtles directly. We can go in and look again at how they're using those habitats. So in this case, maybe even looking at how are they overwintering, like where are they overwintering in those habitats? And I'll show you a graph of that later. We can look at temperatures. The transmitter itself can be temperature sensitive. And then we also put these other little devices on some of them called iButtons. These actually record temperature for us every 3 hours, whether we see the turtle or not. And we can download the information off of that. And then another part of our study, we were looking at what they eat. This is actually wild blueberries that are on the site. And so we can gather all kinds of information whenever we find these turtles. So some of you might be wondering, what are the turtles doing right now? And the answer is not very much. They are mostly still underground, so it's more like this right now. We're starting to see a little bit of green, but for the most part, they're still in the ground. The ground is colder than the air temperature, and so it takes them a minute to start emerging. As we get into late March, though, we start to see them popping up, like you see here with this guy. But they're usually not moving a whole lot yet. The ground is still quite cold. It's getting warmer and we might have some really warm days, but they're on that cold ground. So it's just taking them a minute to start warming up so that they can move. Remember that these guys are what we call ectotherms. And so they're cold-blooded, which means that they rely on the environment for their temperature. And so until the ground temperature in particular starts getting warmer, they're not able to move or even digest their food. All right, so this is the kind of data that we can get off of the iButtons. We also have iButtons that we place in the ground for some different studies of the environment. And here you see in orange, the turtle temperature, so the iButton on the turtle, and then in blue, the temperature, the iButton in the ground. And you can see just how nicely they are following the ground temperature until we get to about mid-March. And so this was from 2020. And this turtle somewhere around the 21st of March that year, all of a sudden its temperature deviated and it was a lot warmer than the ground temperature. This is telling us that turtle has come up above ground where the air temperature is warmer. Or maybe they're in the sun and can actually start absorbing that heat with their shell. And so this is what we would call emergence. And so this guy's approximately March 20th to 21st is when they emerged. And we've done this with a number of different turtles, and we see emergence anytime from March till May. We've actually had turtles move. We had one this year that was moving in January, moved about what was that, about 18 meters. And for some godforsaken reason, we don't know why they do what they do. They can't tell us. But this would be the normal emergence time. They usually stay underground most of that time. But this tells us information. If we follow them over time, are we seeing this date shift at all because of global warming? Are some years they're later? Are some years they coming out earlier? So that's the kind of stuff that we can learn from this. And then as we get into April and we get that warmer ground, we start to see some other behaviors, including mating. Now, a lot of people will see turtles mounting each other, one climbing on top of the other, and they're like, oh, they're mating. No, they do that for dominance. And so it might be two females, it might be two males. If you're lucky, it is a male and a female. But if they're actually mating, this is what they do. The male will actually fall backwards like this in order to mate with the female. And so if you come on turtles out in the woods and they look like this, please leave them alone. That's a very important function in order for us to have baby turtles. So that's happening in April, as well as other times during the year. These guys are capable of something called sperm storage. And so when they mate with each other, the females can actually store that sperm for a couple of years. So even if they don't find each other to mate, she can actually still produce viable eggs during the year for nesting. And so it's pretty well documented in these guys. And like I said, by the time we get to April, they're starting to get warm enough to be able to start eating again. They'll eat things like strawberries, as you see here. They love strawberries, but also a lot of insects that they're feeding on. Box turtles are actually omnivores, so they eat a little bit of everything. By the time we get to May, yes, we're finally getting to that time where they're starting to form nests. And this is where we've had Zoo Atlanta come in and they've brought their ultrasound. We wanted to see, are our turtles producing eggs? Well, God forbid, every single one of the females we brought in had eggs in them, which is awesome. We were so excited to see that. And then they'll start nesting. This is actually a nest that I found right in the middle of one of our bike trails. And so it had dug a nest. It doesn't look like it laid any eggs. Maybe it was, interrupted by somebody or a biker. They will actually produce a lot of false nests before they actually lay their eggs. So who knows what the turtle was doing, but that's what kind of a turtle nest would look like. They dig it with their hind legs and then would deposit the eggs, recover them, and then leave them to hatch. So very much like a sea turtle. Most of you have probably seen sea turtles nesting. They lay the eggs and then go back to the ocean. For these guys, the eggs will incubate about 60 to 90 days before they start emerging and look like this cute little guy over here. Now, interesting little factoid if you hadn't heard before, but these guys have what's called temperature-dependent sex determination. And that means that the temperature of the eggs in the nest is what actually determines the sex of these turtles. So a little bit more science for you guys. So again, this temperature-dependent sex determination, or what some people call environmental sex determination, basically means that incubation temperature determines the sex. And most often in turtles, the higher incubation temperature will produce the larger sex, which in most turtles, that sex is the female one. So over here on the far right, you see this kind of image. The 100 represents when 100% of the offspring are female. And so as the temperature gets higher, that's where you see that 100% female ratio. So at high temperatures, you get females. At low temperatures, that's where you get males. And there are some metabolic differences between individuals and some species with these incubation temperatures as well. But the important thing is here is you do get different sexes because of this. And so how do you get different sexes of individuals within a nest? Now, for box turtles, the nest is so shallow, it very well may be that every single egg becomes the same sex. Now, the females can nest in different areas. They can nest in shady areas. They can nest in sunny areas. That will change the temperature of those nests from year to year. They might dig a little deeper. And then with something like a sea turtle, where the nest is actually much deeper, the eggs at the bottom of the pile might be one sex because it's cooler, versus the sex of the turtles at the top of the nest that maybe gets more sun on the surface might be the other sex. So there's a lot of questions that might be, again, happening with global warming. And are they shifting the time of the year they're nesting? Are they changing where they're nesting? There's a lot of questions that are interesting because of that. And so this is a little different from genetic sex determination. We have XX for female and XY for male. So the Y chromosome has a gene on it that determines the sex. But for turtles, basically their reproductive organs can become either sex. And so as they're incubating, there's sometime during that early development that whatever that temperature is, that will trigger one gene versus another to turn on. So in the genetics of the organism, the genes control what your cells are doing. And one of these genes might be triggered by a certain temperature, telling that those certain cells that are going to become the reproductive organs to develop into an ovary or a testes. So the temperature for these guys is super important. Global warming is a big concern for these guys. And so we have nesting, we have eggs. The question is, will they ever make it to become an adult? And chances are most of them will not. And so, you can look up the different numbers for different species, but there's as much as 100% of the nest might be destroyed in areas with a lot of predators. There's lots of animals that love to eat these eggs. And you can see some of them listed here: raccoons, skunks, foxes, possums, coyotes, feral hogs, whatever can get to them. Some of these obviously are higher in number in human areas because of the food resources and the habitat that we provide for them. And so that can be problematic for a group like ours that has a very urban influence. So again, that's kind of a question of what's going to happen to the turtles if all the nests keep getting predated. And even if the nest and the hatchling makes it to hatch, then there's other threats. Birds like to eat baby turtles. Snakes will eat baby turtles. Ants, especially the invasive fire ants, can attack a nest and a hatchling and kill them, in addition to dogs and cats and everything else. So turtles have a real uphill battle in just being able to get out of the nest and try to survive to adulthood. And locally, we have a new threat, and that is the armadillo. The armadillo, it has naturally been migrating up from South America for a long time, and they've been hitting Georgia the last decade or so. There's already been publications out there about their impact on sea turtle nests because we have so many people studying them. And I've talked to folks that indicate that these guys are probably also digging up box turtle nests if they can find them as well. So again, a lot of challenges for these little guys just to make it to adulthood. So there's a lot of people that ask, what can you do? If you do have turtles in your yard, you can try to help with this process. By number one, leave the nest alone, but you can build these nest protectors. And there's a bunch of stuff online if you want to look it up. This was just a simple image that I found of one that's just some hardware cloth folded over in the corners and staked down to try to deter predators that might want to try to get to them. And the one thing that's really important is that you do allow for an exit. So there's usually a little doorway kind of at the bottom where the hatchlings can eventually come out, or you have to make sure you're checking them on a regular basis. If you see a turtle nesting, and there's another shot of one there nesting, don't obviously try to let her finish, let her do her job. Don't try to move the eggs. Don't try to dig them out. Some people are like, the eggs need to be rotated. There are some species of animals, some birds, that you do have to rotate the eggs, not these ones. You can actually suffocate the embryos by rotating the eggs. So the best thing is just leave them alone. If you want to protect them, you can build these little protectors for them. All right, so now we're into summer and fall. We've, hopefully had some nesting. Then the job is, get as many resources as you can. Here's some different food resources. They eat lots of insects. They eat lots of fruits, including muscadines. They eat lots of worms. Some of you might know Miss Rockalina. She's a very famous rescue box turtle out there. So I had a shot of her eating a worm. All of this is fair game for these guys. Like I said, they're omnivores. They're very opportunistic, and they'll eat a little bit of everything to, again, rebuild some of their energy reserves to kind of get ready for overwintering. So we actually would collect fecal samples from our turtles whenever we were working with them. We had a student start doing some analyses. So this is a example little bit of data from a poster that we put together last year of some of her results. And, some of the things you expect, they're eating all different kinds of insects that they would encounter in the woods. If some of you are familiar with June beetles, that's the wings from a June beetle, a crayfish claw. So we do have crayfish out in our woods that they're eating, lots of snails, some things that we can't really see the results of that we're sure they're eating. They're probably eating some worms that we don't see, some slugs, mushrooms that they're probably eating that we just didn't have evidence of in our fecals, not because they weren't there, just it was hard to see. We didn't really analyze specifically for that stuff. Some other cool things that we found were some different invasive species. So if you are familiar with the European hornet, the really big hornets, this is the head from one of those hornets. So our entomologist suggested that it was probably scavenged off of the ground because chances are the turtle wasn't leaping up and grabbing these guys out of the air. And the other is privet seeds. So this is a seed from invasive privet. A lot of people have seen privet hedges around the houses. Well, privet has kind of gotten out into the habitat, as you saw in some of the images earlier, and creates this really thick undergrowth. It's very invasive. It literally changes the habitat and habitat characteristics. So these guys are eating the seeds and they are dispersing the seeds. And so that is an important discovery. And then the other unfortunate thing that we were observing is that the turtles are actually ingesting plastic. And at least in this case, they're able to pass it through their digestive system, but that's very problematic. So here in A, this is a piece of plastic bag, much like, grocery store bag that you would find. And then B are little pellets of styrofoam or polystyrene that's out there. So as far as we know, once we get this published, we'll be the first to indicate that in box turtles. So there's a lot of problems with plastics. Again, that could probably be a whole nother conversation. Many of you have probably seen turtles like this that get stuck in the rings that used to come on cans and other bottles like Gatorade bottles. So it's really important to cut those up when you're going to dispose of them. A lot of research in sea turtles. You can read some of the numbers here. There's a lot of evidence of plastics in the diets of sea turtles, and it's impacting their lifespan. This little report here was very disturbing. After ingesting just 14 pieces of plastics, they have a 50% chance of death just from that. 186 pieces of plastic found in a single green sea turtles. And so what's the impact to our box turtles? We don't know. Nobody's really been studying them enough to know that. But extrapolating what we know from what we see in sea turtles, and now the fact that we are seeing that in our box turtles, that could be a real problem for our turtles. All right, I mentioned overwintering. So now we've gone through summer, we've been refreshing our resources. As we approach winter, they are still eating as long as the temperature stays warm enough. Eventually, the temperature gets cold enough that they physically can't digest their food. So they have to stop eating early enough, make sure they hydrate themselves, and then they migrate back to where they overwinter. So out of all those dots earlier, I didn't really show you home ranges, but their home ranges are fairly decent sized. I think that's on the next slide, but their overwintering areas are very small, as you can see here. So that's part of their job. They got to eat, and then they got to go back to where they overwinter. Right. And I think the next slide has it. So this is just a small snippet of our work. And it corresponds to what a lot of other people have observed in box turtles, their average home range, which is basically, how much land are they using altogether? It was around 10 acres or so. So some sites show a little higher, some show a little lower. So we're kind of on the ballpark of what other people have been observing. And then the average range is actually closer to 4 acres. And so that's not very much. Considering we have 77 acres, that kind of explains it. Our turtles hopefully have, a good amount of space to be able to live adequately. When you look at those numbers, though, and then look at what we observed in this small subset of turtles, the average overwintering locations take up 0.25 acres, so a quarter of an acre, which is probably smaller than the lot size that your house is on right now. They basically, that's telling us they're going back to the same exact spot to overwinter. And we see this with our turtles now. We have flagging out there to indicate where they overwintered last year. They go back and literally will almost be underneath the same flagging from last year. So again, what's the importance of that with respect to managing property for these turtles? There's very specific locations that they are choosing to use for overwintering. And so when we're managing property for them for turtle success, we have to think about their overwintering, not just what they're doing the rest of the year, but where they're going to overwinter is super important. All right. And so getting to some of the conservation, and I know a lot of people are probably on here because they're already somewhat aware of what's going on with turtles, but turtles are one of the most endangered groups on the planet. 54% of our turtle species on this planet are facing extinction for a variety of reasons. And that's even with all the efforts that we put into global conservation. So literally around the world, turtles are still in trouble. They're in big trouble. There's books written about this. And so, as what can we do to try to help with this process? Number one is awareness. You guys are here, which is great. We're so excited to see how many people signed up for this. But there's a lot of issues. And this isn't just around the world. This is in our backyard, right? And so here along the left, you can kind of read through these different states and how many turtles have been confiscated. So people are smuggling these turtles out of the United States, which means they go out into the woods and collect them, or they find other people to collect them and they buy them. And these are only the ones that have been caught. How many are not actually being caught? And these turtles are making their way out of the country. So I've pulled up a couple that were recent. This is one, a guy trafficked over 2,000 box turtles to Hong Kong, where they can be sold for over $2,000 a piece. It's a good bit of profit to be made off of them, unfortunately. Here's another one. There was more than 200 turtles seized in South Carolina. These are some of those turtles. And you can see the great diversity in the shell patterns on these guys. They're absolutely beautiful, which is partly why they're being smuggled to other countries. They're popular as pets because they're so pretty. They're a manageable size. Unfortunately, some people actually eat them as well. Luckily, this group was confiscated. They actually got transferred to UGA for some genetic and health screening, and you'll see more on them in a second. But so box turtles, spotted turtles, wood turtles, loggerhead musk turtles, different types of musk turtles. Where's there? Diamondback terrapins. So, it's not just box turtles, it's all of these, and it's in our own backyard. And so, we have to stay diligent. We have to be careful, even with our own data, to try not to tell people where our turtles are as a result. right? Here's another one from Kentucky from 2001. This is how the turtles were being held. This is very problematic because they're all just crowded together there. There's not many food resources for them. This is a problem with respect to disease transmission. Anytime you put a bunch of animals together like that are stressed, if any of them are diseased, they're going to spread that like crazy. We actually in the Midwest still have box turtle races, believe it or not. Kids will bring their local box turtles and they have these little races. Well, this guy in Kentucky, he was approaching people and offering to buy them for $10, most likely from kids, right? So he could go to these box turtle races and say, "Hey, kid, I'll give you $10 for that turtle." Well, what child wouldn't say yes? And so he has an easy way to collect a bunch of these turtles and then be able to sell them on the market. And so this, amongst other things, spurred these different box turtle species. We actually have 9 different box turtle species, like the ornate and some of the Mexican varieties. But they're all listed in the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species, otherwise known as CITES, that prohibits their export. But again, we have to actually catch the people to be able to do anything about it. And that's the hard part. So the good news is there's lots of us that care. And this is just a little snippet of all this different stuff. So I used the title on the slide. I stole it from one of our other colleagues, Matt Allender, Dr. Matt Allender. He does all kinds of disease testing on box turtles. So he had a talk, if you want to go look it up someday, saving the world one box turtle at a time. And it's all of us. We all have to come together to help. So he's at the University of Illinois and also works as a zoo vet with the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. Here's us. I told you the zoo would pop back up. This is Dr. Megan with Dr. Hislop. And we were actually testing all of our turtles for some different viruses that they might have been carrying. Over here, the Smithsonian's National Zoo has their own box turtle group doing research. And then here's UGA. I mentioned those 200 turtles. They actually created these outdoor areas so that they could check on these turtles, make sure they're healthy, and hopefully be able to release them. And so they actually have a group called Bulldogs for Box Turtles, which is kind of fun. We need to have our own. We've kind of talked about it. But anyway, and then another very important group, if you're not familiar with it and you love turtles, look up the Turtle Survival Alliance. They have a facility in South Carolina where they actually raise a bunch of turtles to try to propagate them for release. And so they're dealing with species from around the world. They do some really amazing work. So when we do confiscate these turtles, what happens to them? And that's a very complex answer. But a couple of things we have to kind of consider is where did they come from? When you confiscate them at Hartsfield-Jackson, where did those turtles come from? Did they come from South Carolina? Did they come from Georgia? Did they come from Kentucky? Where did they come from? How, and I'm sure the person that had them isn't necessarily going to tell you or be able to tell you. So one of the good things the Turtle Survival Alliance is doing is they're initiating this group called the Atlas of Turtle Genomes for Conservation. And so we can look at their genetics and try to figure out where are their genetics matching up, just like we can look at Irish or German or African or Chinese. We can do the same thing for these turtles. We can get different samples from around their range and then try to match up the genetics of the confiscated turtles with the species. And I'm sorry this kind of turned out small, but what they're doing this with are some really important key species, including Blanding's turtles, bog turtles, which you see up here, diamondback terrapins, the eastern box turtle, of course, wood turtles, the southern Pacific pond turtles, and spotted turtles. So that's something that's really important. When we confiscate these turtles, we can try to use those genetics to try to get them back to the area that they came from. Hopefully, it's just in the beginning stages right now. And then the other thing is we have to factor in these diseases. And so this is some of Matt's work testing turtles in Illinois or wherever he got them from for this study to look at disease prevalence. And obviously during the winter months, there's not a whole lot going on. Their cold temperatures kind of prevents a lot of diseases from being very active. But during the summer months, which you see here in the middle where all the color is, not only can they have one of these diseases, but they might have all three that he was testing for simultaneously. So that's something you have to factor in. If you're going to release turtles back into the wild, you don't want to release them with a bunch of diseases that can wipe out the local population. So it's not an easy scenario, just finding a turtle and putting it somewhere. And then the other scenario, as we're well aware of around Atlanta, is just habitat destruction. As long as that's happening, these turtles are going to keep getting displaced. If we confiscate them, or if they're trying to escape from these development areas, where do we put them? Where can they go? Who's going to preserve that land? How much land do we need? And those are some of the questions we're looking at. At least we can say, well, to have a healthy population, you need to have this size and this many. But then you have to have the property. And so that's something we don't have answers for, but it's something that we're very concerned about. And there are groups putting together conservation plans. We're changing some laws. And so after that 200 were confiscated, South Carolina changed some laws to make it harder to collect these species of turtles and do anything with them. Some states have very lax laws, others were a little bit more strict. And so South Carolina was kind of catching up. In Georgia specifically, they're all protected. Individuals are not allowed to just pick them up and keep them as pets. You have to have a permit in order to do that. And usually it's an educational institute or someone like us. We're not really keeping them inside, but we're going out and we're capturing them briefly for research purposes. And this is a shot of one of the turtles from the Alachie Nature Center near us at a wildlife expo. So that's what we're using them for, so that children and adults can still have experiences with these turtles and learn about them in a special setting. So, but for people, the average public, what you can do is really just, if you do see them crossing the road, help them get off of the road, move it in the direction it was traveling. Don't take it home with you unless you feel like it's in danger. And even then, you need to reach out to somebody that can help you. You're not allowed to keep it yourself. And so if you do find an injured turtle, or a turtle like this one that has these really bad ear abscesses, you need to reach out to somebody that can help you. Take note of this. This Animal Help Now is a great resource that they've started, and this works for all the different species. And if you find a box turtle, the best facility nearest us is the Chattahoochee Nature Center. They do a wonderful job with these guys. These ear abscesses are very common in box turtles these days, and other turtles as well, especially when they're exposed to a lot of chemicals like pesticides and herbicides in people's yards. They get these ear infections that have to be drained. So that's what you can do if you find one that you feel is in danger, is reach out to one of these groups that can rehabilitate the animal and figure out what can be done with it. So to bring us full circle, why did the turtle cross the road? I still don't know. I don't have all the answers for you. We do know some reasons. You know, they're going to lay eggs. They're going to find water. They're going to find a mate. The roads get warm. Maybe they just want to sit on the road because it's nice and warm. But unfortunately, that leads to their demise. A large number of turtles get hit by cars or even lawnmowers in the yard. So, you know, you can just try to keep an eye out for them, help them when you can. If you're mowing your yard, do a walk around the yard and just kind of check for them first. Raise the mower a little bit so you don't hit them. Do what you can. When you find them, again, don't try not to move them. If you do, just move them off the road. You know, let them stay in their home. They can actually navigate back to their territory. And so if you move them, they're going to probably want to come back home. And so it's really better to leave them where they're at. Try not to use a bunch of fertilizer and pesticides in your yard. Plant native plants, especially, you know, keeping an eye to things that might produce fruit that they'll eat. Make a compost pile, which might actually attract other, critters, but box turtles love compost piles, not only for some of the food resources you might leave out there, but also the insects and the worms that might be attracted to it. leave brush piles, which seems odd, but they take up refuge under there. They hide under there to, maybe get some shade on a hot summer day. Those kind of things are very useful. And of course, in drought years, especially, make sure that there's water out for them. So these are all little things that you can do at home to help them if you know you have them in your backyard. So with that, I'll leave you with these beautiful images that were created by one of our art students several years ago. They hang in the foyer of our building, and I love them every day. She went out in the field with us and studied the turtles with us and used some of those images to paint these gorgeous images here. But hopefully it was a little bit of good information, a little bit of science, and we learned something new. So, questions?
Wow, I cannot thank you enough. Right off the bat, like slide 4, I think I put in the chat, Dr. Moog. This is the greatest slide ever in a presentation. Um, I had I on it wasn't slide 4, so it must have been further down where we were learning about how they hinge to really create the box,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
pretty incredible. Um, oh, I get to look at myself twice. That's cute.
Oh, sorry, I took it off. I thought you were gonna undo that eventually anyway. I could pull that slide back up. Let's see, where is he at? The box.
Well, I think in our chat, and Dr. Hislop mentioned that there was a slide that someone wanted to see again, and so I'm glad you have that still pulled up because I think there were some more questions that were
Oh,
in the chat.
tried to get it to go to that slide, but why didn't it let me go? There we go. Is that it? There.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And so just to see how that actually works and that you took the time to draw the pictures so that we can understand how their shell actually operates and how unique that is to other turtles. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, Dr. Hislop, did you see anything in the chat that you guys were able to address during this Q&A time?
Wow, we had some great questions. Did we want to open it up though if people wanted to ask the questions that I might not have gotten to with them or
was there a slide that someone wanted to see again?
somebody
Yes,
wanted to see the one of the temperature dependent sex
it was
determination
the
slides.
male to female ratio one, correct?
Yeah, that's what I thought I saw.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and this, a lot of this really started coming out, I believe, because of snake breeders. The snake folks are just fanatical about what they do, and and I think in the zoo environment as well, when they had these eggs and they were incubating them in a controlled environment, um, they would hatch all these guys out and they would all be the same sex, which of course we know is not the way it should be, right? It should be like 50-50. So they knew something was going on, and that triggered a lot of studies a while ago, honestly, with respect to these temperatures, especially for the more common species that you would see, in zoos and what the breeders are working with. So we're learning more. There are some turtles that do have some sex determination. I had another slide of that I use in my vertebrate zoology class, but I was just trying to stick to the main one here. Most turtles are going to use this temperature dependent sex determination modality. But yeah, it's the snake people in particular that really drove a lot of that work.
So Jordan asked to see the slide that's the male versus female distribution. Maybe
I'm not.
that one.
Was it this one? Um, or the locations. The other thing that I had that was sex was oh wait, that's our data, I think. Locations might be easier for me to do it this way.
Yeah, Jordan commented saying locations.
Yeah, and this was just 1 year's worth of data. I don't even remember how many, I didn't put it on here, how many turtles this actually represented at the time. About what that first year we have about 7 or 8 turtles, Dr. Hislop. So it's not all the
Something
turtles.
like
We're
that.
up to about 67 that we've had transmitters on at this point, but as it was just early data. I just like it because it was simple and you can kind of see where they're at. Um, you know, there's definitely a lot of overlap between the males and females for sure. But this area up here, it's our upland area. Honestly, we haven't had many females up in that area, even after all of these years. We have a couple of our males that hung out in that corner for some reason, even to this day. I don't know why. Maybe it's a moisture related thing. I did find the nest. I think one of these pink dots somewhere over in this way is where I found that one nest. But yeah, why are turtles doing what they are doing? I wish they could tell us. It'd be a lot easier.
For the rest of us in the public and those that take your research and data and distribute it out to everyone else, we're counting on you research university folks to tell us these answers
Yeah.
through your data
We're
collection.
we're trying. It
You're
just make
doing
it so
great.
much easier if we had, Dr. Doolittle that could tell us what they're saying and doing. And why did you go to Walmart? We really want to know. And I just see the typo, I'm sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, I wish they could tell us. We had another one this past year that was heading to Walmart. We had to bring her back. Um, you
Mm.
know, we we try to keep them in safety when we can, but unfortunately, we don't catch all of them. We got to let turtles do what turtles do, and we're not out there 24/7 with them. But we're trying to figure out, if we are going to protect habitats, what do they need to be successful?
Mm.
And what they need in the spring and summer is very different from what they need in the winter, is kind of what we're observing. We haven't tweezed a lot of that out. And then, of course, what we see here in the Piedmont of Georgia, how different is that from what they require in Michigan,
Mm.
Connecticut? It might be very, very different. We don't really have much elevation on our site, but there was a talk I went to that I believe it was either Illinois or Ohio. They were studying overwintering, but all their turtles were overwintering on south-facing slopes, which makes sense because that's where they would get more sun, so that would help them come out of overwintering earlier, which maximizes the amount of time they have for feeding and doing other turtley things. Like I said, our lot is a lot more flat, so it's probably going to be hard to tweeze anything like that out. But there's certainly something very specific about what they're going back to that one spot for. We just don't know exactly what that is yet. That's hopefully slated for this summer for us to study. We have 2 students that are really highly motivated. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit of funding from our university to support them to go out and do that, specifically looking at, nesting. I'm sorry, not overwintering, nesting. But we're also going to set up some stations probably for the overwintering and do the same kind of stuff. So,
I
Jennifer, there's been some other questions that have come through. Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
No, please. You were going right where I was going.
Ah, so Unity has asked a couple times. She has seen a blue tinted turtle in the wild. She's only seen one in Texas, and I thought I'd throw that to you. Dr. Mook covers more of our health related issues on the team.
blue tinted box turtle. Out in Texas, there might be some of the other species that have slightly different colorations. Most of our box turtles here
Oh,
have.
sorry, Unity said it was in Georgia. For some
Oh,
reason, I thought I read Texas somewhere up there.
oh, okay. Yeah, blue. I don't
Oh,
know.
Brian actually brings up something really important, that with these turtle races that Dr. Mook mentioned, they do paint them. They
Yeah.
they do. They will paint those. And so, Unity, I'm sure you could have probably noticed if it was paint or not, but that does happen. They decorate the turtle shells sometimes, which can be really damaging, and it can also really influence the thermal ecology of the species, what kind of how much heat that they're going to absorb.
Yeah, I mean, most of the colorations don't trend towards blue for this species.
Mm-mm.
Um, the snapping turtles maybe could be kind of construed as bluish, greenish,
Yeah,
but not the box
depending.
turtles. So yeah.
Well, Unity, you did say you found that in Milton Park, and that is a park that I spend a lot of time in. And I would love for us to go back and recreate
Yeah.
that
And I mean,
moment.
next time if you see it, get a picture. There's nothing
Yeah,
illegal about pictures. Just try not to share it and tell everybody where it's at. But send it to Jen or myself or Dr. Hislop, and we'll be like, ooh, ah, and then why is it blue? And we'll see if we can figure that out. But we always love getting pictures.
that's right.
So Mary has a really great question here about her rescue dog grabbing one of the turtles, and luckily they can close up. Mary, I had this happen. We were actually tracking the Walmart turtle, and it was in someone's yard behind Walmart, and we were taking data on the turtle, and I look up and I look down, the turtle's gone, just gone, and I see this chocolate lab running off, right? So we're like, "Hey, sweetie, come on over here. We got it." So we got it out of the dog's mouth. Luckily, some of the labs and stuff have like the softer
Yeah.
mouths and are good at doing that. And he was fine.
So the average
But
dog
you ask
obviously
what
not
to
good.
do. They ask what to do with a turtle that a dog collects. If you can get that turtle back to as close to where it was and let it kind of do its thing while you keep the dog inside for a little while, that's what
Mhm.
I would recommend.
That's assuming that he hasn't been chewed on. So,
Yes.
typically try to get the turtle away from the dog. If it's okay, go ahead and try to put it back where you think, it came from. But if there is damage to the shell, that's when you would get on that animal first now, try to get it to Chattahoochee, let them take care of it because it's probably going to need some antibiotics and some time to heal before it goes back out to the wild. So, unfortunately, that's what happens with some of the dogs. But a cool thing, there are some dogs that have actually been trained to find box
Mhm.
turtles for research, and they use a specific breed of spaniel, at least at this point in time that we know of, that are known for having gentle mouths because they use them for birding. But they can be trained to find turtles for research purposes. But they're very specific dogs that are trained for that. And even then, there's a risk that the turtle could get hurt. But the average dog, not good. And like I said, just check them for injuries first, and otherwise try to get them back to where they go.
Okay, so one piece to this that I think that I heard in your presentation is they are going to travel a similar path. This is what you have found. So no, if you move them to another site or location, their tendencies to go right back to where they want to go, no
They're
matter whether
yeah,
you move them or not.
yeah, they're probably gonna want to come wherever they want to be is where they want to go.
Hmm.
So ideally, we would like ours to stay on our site. We've had some since we're on this screen. You see these dots down here. This one decided to migrate up beside a road, and we actually brought him back and put him back. And a couple days later, he was back. So this is where he wanted to be for whatever reason. So we eventually let him be there because it was stressful to keep moving him when he wanted to come back to where he wanted to be. So that's the idea. If they have their home and that's where they want to be, you take them out of that, they're going to want to go back. The question is for us is why was a turtle that was happy in this wetland area, why is he all of a sudden going to go all the way over here and want to stay there? We don't know. We still don't know. That is now a destroyed area, and so we moved him back to the wetland. He couldn't go back because there's nothing to go back to. He tried. He made it to a ravine, and all the construction I think freaked him out, and so he went eventually back to his original habitat. But yeah, it's important that you you let them be home because that's where they want to be. Just like birds, migrate, they can navigate and find their way back and forth. These guys are doing something similar. Sea turtles, the females go back to the nest where they hatched from. That the same beach where they hatched from is where they go back to nest. And so there's something that they're using for navigation. The question is, why do they decide all of a sudden to go to Walmart and not come back? We don't know that answer.
Yeah, so more to study. And my other question is if people want to invest time or resources into your resource or into your research, do they have a way and a means to do that?
Not to us specifically. I'm not aware of, and Natalie deals with more of the money stuff with her grants and things. If someone just said, I have $5,000 that I want to give you, we do have a foundation where we have some money. I don't know how they would finagle that. But otherwise, that Turtle Survival Alliance is a great resource. If you have affiliations with UGA and you want to do, was it Bulldogs for Tortoises or Turtles or something? There's always places you can donate money to. But Natalie or Dr. Hislop, I don't know, do you have any clue if someone wanted to donate money, how they would handle it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have an account with our UNG Foundation, which is the philanthropic branch of UNG. And if anybody does want to, they can donate straight to that and they can just reach out to us for that link. And, we'd love that. It would go straight to supporting our undergraduate students who help in this work also.
Yeah, we have to replace the transmitters every 2 years, and they're about $250 to buy originally, and then about $100 to refurbish every 2 years. So it gets expensive, and we have about 30 of them out right now.
I'm really glad somebody slipped a question in last minute. I don't know if either of you saw that before we reach an end to our time. So, no, Jordan, we're glad to get that in. So, sorry, I'm now curious. Do you know if they have magnetic reception crystals? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, so he's been doing some reading because I've been researching this a little bit for my vert. They've found that in the birds
Mhm.
that's how they're orienting to navigate back. They travel such long distances. And again, why I showed you that phylogenetic tree, right? That these guys are placed right next to that bird archosaur branch where it's very feasible that these guys have similar um, capabilities. I did not dig in to see if they've maybe done any work on sea turtles with that because that's where more of the money is.
Mhm.
But I can imagine that these guys probably have something similar. Now, what causes it to reset that they want to go to Walmart and not come back? I don't know. Um, and we don't have the capabilities to sacrifice those animals to study that kind of a question, unfortunately. But I because birds do, I imagine these guys probably have something similar. Yeah, some cool stuff out on that. That might be a fun talk someday in the future too.
Yeah, there you go. 2.0, Box Turtles 2.0, when research unfolds even more. Obviously, we have a curious group of people about
No, that's great.
fascinating turtles. And, um, I can't thank you both enough for A, the research that you do, and B, that you're willing to come on and share your wealth of knowledge with the public. I would say this was a really engaging uh,
Awesome. You
presentation.
said you wanted more science, so it ended up being a little bit longer,
No,
but
it was
hopefully
great.
I got some of the cool science in there. I think we had some younger folks. Didn't you say your son was supposed to be watching? So
Yeah,
hopefully there is some, general information in there, but it's sprinkled with enough science to keep it a little bit more interesting for the more mature folks that have
that's right.
dug
Science is
into the
cool.
science, like magnetic chemicals in eyes.
Yeah, and I challenged you guys with
Uh-huh.
the fact that the people in the public they are citizen scientists,
Oh,
and
uh,
they are going to they want to do a deep dive where they want to do a deep dive. And
yeah, and there isn't enough time. I mean, this is probably twice as long as what I had for you yesterday, right?
that's right.
So
Well, thank you both very much. And
thank
just
you for
know,
having us.
folks, that if you have more questions or more curiosities, you're always welcome to email me. And I am happy to share that information with Dr. Mook and Hislop to get responses back to the public. But also remember, this is going to be, this presentation will be on our website, so you can go back and refer to it. You can share it how you see fit. It's public information, and we're happy to have other cities also be able to view this. Because guess what? We're all in the Piedmont, and this is all cool Piedmont stuff, which is what I like to say. I'm always curious more about the Piedmont, and anybody that has to do with the Piedmont, come on out. But yeah, so after this presentation, I know we kept you over a little bit. Please take our survey, share ideas or species that you want to learn more about, and we're going to try to find professionals all over the country that can share their awesome research or information. So I want to say thank you for joining us and have a good night.
Thanks, Jen.
Got it.
You all.